Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome back to the stage, Christine Kelly.
Merci beaucoup, Richard.
Thank you very much. Richard has already set the scene for this session with Maggy, BERRE, John GOSIER, Auma OBAMA, and the R&B star Echo. It's a true pleasure to have you all here, and I am very pleased to be able to meet such personalities. Maggy, BERRE, I'll start with you. You are described as being full of energy, full of projects. I've read a lot of things about you to understand who you are. Enthusiastic, full of passion, specialist of communication. This is truly your sector, your area of expertise. What would be, since we've already set the scene, we're in the forum about transformation. We're talking here about the role of women and of the youth to help leverage this transformation. What would be the immediate measures that should be taken by companies to move into this transformation? We go directly into the subject. Well, it is true to say that companies are present on the internet, but if we come from the fact that on the 50 Gabon companies, how many of them have really built a communication, marketing, sales strategy about social networks? What you're saying is that social networks is an incredible tool. So that's your first point. Well, it's obvious. It imposes. It's self-evident. You first need to apprehend. A presence of the net is not enough. You have to build up a true strategy of communication, linking economic aspects of the company, the level of development of the country in itself. So social networks, that's point one. Auma OBAMA. I read sentences, descriptions of you to talk about you. I like them very much. You created the foundation Sautiku, meaning powerful way. You created that in Kenya, helping young in difficulties to support young generations so that they take their future in their own hands. Among the different sentences, you said poverty is not an excuse. Is this the type of message that you want to pass on to the young generation?
Definitely. First of all, Sautiku means powerful voices, which means that the young people need to realize that they have a voice, they can communicate their needs, and by doing that, they take responsibility for the actions that they have to follow up with having used their voice. And the reason I say poverty is not an excuse, because if you look at the definition of poverty that we have on the continent, very often it's a definition that has been given to us because we constantly compare ourselves with the West. And just because you live in a hut and you don't have running water and you don't have electricity, you don't necessarily have to be poor, because if you have 10 acres of land and you're not farming that land, you are not poor. So part of what my foundation tries to do is redefine what we as Africans see as poverty. And we start with the youth because I really believe in the cliche that they are our future, and they are the ones who are going to carry this on in the next generation to realize that we ourselves as Africans have to define what poverty is. And even if you are poor, you can still improve your life. We have maybe 1 or 2 generations of our parents who have done well, but all of us came from a situation that in the West is considered poor, and we all made it. So that's why we say that poverty is absolutely no excuse.
Comme quoi chacun peut avoir...
So that everyone can have its own definition of poverty. Another sentence, another question for you. When you say, don't give us fish, don't learn us how to fish, but ask us whether we eat fish. because it's always been said that you don't give away fish. You have to learn how to fish. You even go further. I mean, the question is, why do you need to eat fish? Well,
where we had a lot to do with development aid, I find, in my opinion, that it's done a lot of damage. No offense to anybody involved in that sector. And we were constantly told, okay, you know, we're not going to give you the fish because we did that, which is part of making you dependent. We will teach you how to fish. And what I always say is that the communication that we're going to have with the West has to be a communication around partnership, collaboration, and eye-to-eye communication, which means that you have to ask me what I want. Don't tell me this is what I need. And one of the things about this fish analogy is that teach them how to fish. And I always say, because I do a lot of public speaking in Europe, why teach me how to fish if I don't eat fish? Ask me what I eat, and let's have a conversation about that, you know? And in the end, I might show you that there are other things that can give you the protein you get from fish without you having to teach me how to fish, and I teach you. So that the dialogue becomes a completely different dialogue as compared to somebody coming in and telling us how to live our lives. And we do that with the youth mainly because very often they don't use their voice. They just accept what they're told. So don't teach me how to fish, ask me if I eat fish.
Toute une autre vision, effectivement, de la pauvreté, toute une autre vision des jeunes. Econ?
Econ, you are the surprise here, and very happy to be here, star of the R&B. You're very respected for everything that you do. You have launched an extraordinary project. When I discovered it, I was seized. Because we talked all through this forum about the lack of electricity. And you've launched an electrification project in Africa in 9 countries. You're now talking about 45 countries. It's only a project a few months old. How does this work? How do you apply it? How are you going to move forward and help the Africans to have access to electricity, as this is very crucial today?
For the question. Ultimately, we always realize as the youth, there's only but so much we can do without electricity. We always talk about what Africa has, what it doesn't have, but it's the basic necessities that's very instrumental in life in general, just to even move forward towards whatever the future is, not even bringing back into the past, but without the basic necessity of electricity, we can't even begin to develop our country. You know, and ultimately my main focus always has been the youth, because today's youth is tomorrow's future, and how we have to look at it. And ultimately, you know, Ms. Obama made a statement that was so incredible, and listening to it, I agree to her in so many ways, because growing up as an African child, you always grow up to respect your elders. You know, you may have an opinion, but you don't necessarily bring that opinion forward because we were never allowed to speak on a table of adults. So we always respected that space. And we keep ideas and we keep innovations all to ourselves, not knowing that we could speak to our elders about these situations. And when you look in a position where the elders stand today, they want to be able to have that open communication with their leaders, open communication with their elders in a way to where those ideas of today that can affect tomorrow can actually be represented and communicated to them to be able to move it forward. You know, when I stop and I look at all these beautiful children out here with all these great minds, and can barely study after 5, 6 o'clock because it gets dark, it actually pains me a lot. You know, and me traveling throughout the world of Africa, becoming who I am and understanding what those spaces and international, communities are. When I'm traveling in these areas and I can't do a sufficient concert because there's no enough electricity to light up the stage, but yet 2 blocks away there's, you know, $5, $6 million mansions, and right across the street there's a little child taking a bath in the lake. It just doesn't make sense. You know, so there has to be a place where we have to be, as Africans, build ourselves up. It's okay to, you know, to partner up and have foreign aid, because the key to success is unity. What we do in Africa affects everywhere else outside of Africa as well. So it's not saying we don't want to accept it. We just want to know, as we're accepting it, how does it benefit us, and how do we grow? How do we create jobs for our youth, and how do they become empowered to be able to help build the future of Africa?
Vous dites, par exemple...
You say, and this yes, you're right, it is, you say, I'm tired to see Africa in poverty. And it's the next generation which will take its future in its hand. You're tired about seeing poverty in Africa.
Poverty can be, identified in different ways. It's a lack of thereof. Whether it's, energy poverty, whether it's, food poverty, whether it's knowledge poverty. Poverty is just the lack of. And ultimately, if we can educate ourselves, educate our youth more than anything, everything can actually be smoothened out, moving towards the future in a way to where we can understand it. So when I speak, I try to speak in a way to where children understand what we're saying. Sometimes we use huge political words, and they don't quite get what we're trying to do or what we're trying to develop. And the lack of communication between that ultimately is what causes the conflicts moving forward. As you can see, just Africa itself, 60% of the population is all children. So it's clear that the children is tomorrow's Africa. So we have to keep that in mind as we're moving forward. Ultimately, this project started in January, and we're now, towards, July, and we've already secured 7 countries. So that shows the action and the speed and how fast we're trying to move this thing forward. Ultimately, we have to have the support of our elders to properly guide us and educate us on how these things move forward as we go. Because one of the biggest problems outside of electricity is also the education factor as well.
Et si j'ai bien compris la façon dont vous fonctionnez, vous faites des partenariats.
If I understood you well, you're having partnerships with the different countries, with local authorities, to sign partnerships, and to do that, you fund electricity access in communities.
It all started with me taking personal money and creating a partnership with 2 good friends of mine who also the youth of Africa, Chon Young and Samba Bachili, and we just wanted to just make a change, and we wanted not only just to create the change, but we wanted to see something actually happen. We wanted to see the energy actually happen. Sometimes you have contracts lay around for 5 to 10 years and there's nothing happening. So I figured the best way is to just let them see, Every country we go into, we pick a village of their choice that we can light up personally with our own funds, so they can physically see. Our African brothers, we have to see. If we don't see with our own eyes, we don't believe.
Excellent.
It's, it's just natural. So ultimately, we have to be in a position where they know that we mean business, and we really want to come and change and create. So we created, partnerships, with NGOs, corporations, and of course, private investors as well, and anyone that wants to see the building of African infrastructure move forward, and we partnered up with those guys.
Très bien. Je viens.
Thank you very much. I'll come back to you, but Maggy BERRE, we were speaking earlier on about access to social networks. Again, the importance of electricity, no social networks, no TV, no communication. Yes, that's crystal clear. In Gabon today, mobile phone companies did integrate that fully in their strategy. Our penetration rate is more than 80% on a population of 1.5 million. We have 800,000 internet subscriptions. Who uses that? The young ones. Well, very good. Jonathan GOSIER, you're a Afro-American guru of technology, blogger, investor, entrepreneur, owning Appfrica, software, creating a company, and you create Women Technology Uganda. What is that?
Women Technology in Uganda is, Women in Technology Uganda is, or WE2 as we call it, is an organization that we fund in Kampala, Uganda, that enables and accelerates the careers of women who have an interest in technology as a career choice. Across the world, there's a lack of female participation in technology, software, engineering, for many reasons. In Uganda, it's especially bad. And so one of the initiatives that was created there by one of our staff members, Barbara Burunji, was this organization which mentors women. It helps find jobs for them. It helps them learn how to code and these types of things. And I believe to date, they've worked with over 50 young female technologists. And it's not just about entrepreneurship. Some of it is just placement, helping them find jobs. But a good portion of it is entrepreneurship and helping them find capital.
Et vous avez misé sur les
and you bet on women, since you say that female have less access to technology, and that also maybe you believe even more in the potential of female, if I may say so.
I think that, I mean, the future is equitable. Everyone needs to have their fair shot. And right now, women don't have that fair shot when it comes to technology. And so that's how I look at it. I wouldn't say that it's to the detriment of men to focus on women. It's to the betterment of everyone. And so that's how I go about it.
Très bien. Donc en tout cas, vous croyez.
Well, thank you very much. So you believe in this potential of women. You are here, the counselor to the President of the Republic here in Gabon. We will soon talk about your vision in Gabon here, but first of all, how to capitalize on the young generation to transform Africa, how to use, if I may say so, the young generation as a leverage to transform Africa. Well, the first element on which I'd like to build on is what has just been said. It is important that generations communicate between the different generations. I'm a kind of a hybrid. I was born in '75, and Generation Y has started in the '80s. So there are 5 years floating period. So we are, in fact, kind of middleman in between the X and Y generation. So we're telling the X generation that they have to accept that the traditional educational system, which was that power was in a community, village, has not disappeared. The only difference is that the community has grown. The fight that we are having here in Africa is a fight for content. The 10 million of information bombarded to the youth without sufficient control or monitoring on the content. I believe that internet can be a colonization tool, terrible. I could, through my equipment, send 10 megabytes while I receive 2. So with 2 small megabytes, if I don't have content in that, I may lose the fight for what is informing our youth. The second aspect is very pragmatic. The young one sitting in front of the computer with a modem, however powerful, must remind that the source of energy is electricity. And that's a local source of energy. I'd like him to know, to realize that this local plug is the potential of our continent. That's the way we do things. And once we've done that, you come to a combination which is quite interesting. The X generation gives the content, explains to us how you do things, and the Y generation innovates. I heard about Mr. Kasparov, to whom I owe a lot of respect. If you want to unleash African potential and move it to the pinnacle, you have to accept the fact that in 1 or 2 years, you will have to have, in 2 years' time, the best player of Sono. When these 2 generations will have talked together, you will have the X generation giving the content, explaining the regulations, the Y generation putting in place the application. So intergeneration dialogue. What is the role of Arnauld, the female, in this area? We haven't mentioned the young ones very much. Oh, sorry for that.
Vous allez m'excuser un peu si je revendique.
Okay, please apologize here if I have to claim back my credibility after doing this, but I would like to wish a happy Mother's Day to Mommy Nicole and to all the mothers who are in this room or listening to us. In fact, I'm claiming this candid initiative because I'm a good son, but also because I think that whatever your role as a CEO or a president of the republic or whatever, we're all aware of how important women are in our lives. It's usually them who help us find the right God, in fact, the different values we want to stick to, but also find our direction and stick to the direction that we've given ourselves. And when we'll have propelled sufficient number of women to key positions of power, I think through those reforms, I'm sure that they will be sustainable for once. The trade unionist I have been retains a fairly straightforward memory, in fact. When we want a meeting to work, we have to bring women around the table, basically. Because they know how to commit. And they can fully commit with their hearts and from their guts. You know, women can be a little bit chilly about commitment, generally speaking, and also have to demonstrate their manhood by being arrogant, and we want to impress women, and that's kind of blocking us in our more straightforward progress. So that's very interesting. Yes, from a trade union point of view, is that one of the lessons you drew? You should pool and capitalize more on the women's power? Yes, definitely. We already do it. And those of us who know our teams, they know that we're recruiting nearly only women, actually. Fantastic. Okay. So let me come back now to John. It's true, we were talking about women's Mother's Day, basically, and I was going to mention it in the beginning. There's a song that you performed called Mama Africa as well. What was your message through this, essentially?
Essentially, it's funny that you mentioned that because, and my staff will contest to that, 90% of my, crew, litigation, and staff is all women, and we get a lot done. He's right. Ultimately, the song Mama Africa was based on just, giving the women worldwide of color, the confidence and understanding that we do recognize how beautiful they are, and we also recognize the contribution that they bring to mankind. Because ultimately, when you look at songs in general today, it gives you a real distorted view of what a woman should be and how you should treat a woman and how women should be presented and respected throughout the world. And when you look at these young rappers and you look at R&B singers, songs become real booty shake-ish or real, love-ish, but you never really understand to what extent. Most of the time it's just about making a hit song, but they don't realize how important that impact of that information is for a child that's listening to it growing up and starting to understand how women should be treated, how women should be spoken to, and the value of what woman is. So, and Mama Africa was to represent that.
Justement, je voulais vous faire réagir parce que vous êtes un peu...
I wanted to prod you to reaction, in fact, because you're a little bit like Youssou N'Dour, somebody who started off in the music industry and musical activities, and then by means of this musical approach, you then stepped forward for a number of much more committed and important militant actions. And just like Youssou N'Dour, you were highly committed, I think, throughout your musical careers. And I think Auma OBAMA also mentioned the strategic or important role of women as a lever to transform today's Africa. How do you picture that sort of lever effect?
Definitely in that context, because I always say we are the nurturers. So in most cases, 99.9%, we are looking about caring and giving back into the family and into the community. For that reason alone, it's very, very important to support the woman and help her grow, because what ends up happening, and we work in our foundation with boys and girls, but what we do say is, although we work with boys and girls, we always have to push the girls a little bit more, because what we tend to do, our socialization is such that if you put a boy and a girl in a situation, the girl steps back and lets the boy go forward, or the man go forward. So part of what we're doing is always to make sure the girl does not get left behind, or the woman doesn't get left behind. But at the same time, being very conscious of the fact that this is not something that can only be done by women alone. And for us, that's very, very important to have both men and women in a room, boys and girls in a room, because you cannot separate the two. The dynamics of our social setting is that we both work together. And that's what we try and put through and put across as a message for the young people, to make sure that the girls don't get left behind, But again, the girls don't leave the boys behind because we're just supporting the girls. And in the end, when they go back home, you have conflict. So it's kind of a difficult kind of position to be in, and especially since the community and the world wants to promote women more very often. It gets a bit trendy. And we want to move away from being trendy and be practical and realistic and also culturally conscious and aware of how we should behave around the gender issue.
Et justement, vous avez...
Yes, indeed, and I think, among others, you've worked on the CARE organization, talking about that notion of care, and you've been extremely efficient in the educational field on several fronts. There's several, I think, tracks that you try to follow in the field of education concerning small kindergarten or child care. And I'm saying this to bounce on what's been said about education and youth, because I believe education is really at the heart or at the center of these mentality transformation, in fact, and we've made progress perhaps at the level of higher education, but also the smaller level before, all of these stages before employment, in fact, are determining, aren't they?
Do you want me to comment?
Not
it was a full stop, right?
Okay.
Okay.
Not necessarily. Okay. Non, c'était juste une...
No, it's true. It was more a comment or a remark on the fact that education is indeed of paramount importance for transforming these mentalities. You're right, we've dwelled perhaps long enough upon this subject. So, Maggy, just a last comment perhaps on this liver position of women and this transformation axis. The African woman indeed has to be working on several fronts at the same time, basically, because she has to endorse different roles. We have, on the one hand, a very burdening family life, but also our role of women as economic actors that becomes, or that is gradually taking up a bigger place. And I think the certain supermarkets, in fact, have now adopted a new range of products which are more specifically geared towards the African women. In fact, we used to be able to have to fit into the existing choice of colors or existing colors in terms of makeup, for example, in supermarkets. And now, gradually, we see those new product supplies that fit our needs much more faithfully. And of course, we need to invest even more in the different values enshrined by women, because as Arnauld was saying, all of this is part of the global balance between the genders. Okay, now I think perhaps we can take a few questions from the audience. The lady sitting on the first row to begin with, perhaps.
Très brièvement, s'il vous plaît.
Hello.
As briefly as possible.
So, I have a question for everyone. Many people know that about $40 billion of remittances came from the U.S. back to the African diaspora, meaning that Africans in the diaspora are sending financial aid to the African country. How are any of you using women, African women and youth in the diaspora as agents of transformation in developing women and youth here in Africa?
That's actually an amazing question. We're actually here now, you know, to get a hold of all the youth, kind of educate them to what their responsibilities are to build Africa forward. The aid money that actually comes in, we're never really informed on how it's distributed, who is distributed to on these things. So we have to find ways and plans to do without the money. Unless we're called towards the budget, then we can help to facilitate those things with ideas that we may have from the youth. Is voices, but ultimately what we do is just try to figure out ways that we can make it happen with what we have at this moment until that time is called on upon us.
If I can,
Oui, une autre réaction, ensuite on prendra la question ici. Oui.
if I can add to
Last reaction.
One of the things that I'm very passionate about is getting the diaspora involved in actually investing in the continent, not aid, investing. And not investing in their family members, but investing in the continent's development. And you talk about the diaspora. For me, the biggest pool of resources that the diaspora has available beyond the the immediate first, second, third generation diaspora members are the African American population in the United States, who command about $1 trillion in capital just in that community alone. And yes, it can be used to develop things there, but I'm very passionate about getting them involved in Africa's narrative and the future of the continent. It's a great opportunity for them to invest, but it's also a great opportunity for Africa to reconnect to its extended diaspora. So I think that's something that we've done quite a bit as Appfrica, and helping these guys learn more about the continent and its various opportunities.
Une réaction. On n'aura pas le temps pour une autre question, mais on écoute effectivement la réaction.
We don't have much time for another question, but we're listening to the other reaction.
Really, really quickly, we have a completely different approach, because when you talk about the remittance from the diaspora, you might as well talk about the remittance from the urban areas to the rural areas, because we focus on the rural area. And one of the things we try to do with the communities we work with, we have another saying, I have a couple: use what you have to get what you need, not what you want, what you need. So look at the resources you have, and then we create platforms where you can use that resource to generate income. Because this constant idea of looking out for your support makes you a victim, and it continues the poverty thing about saying, I'm poor, somebody will help me from outside. So before we even get to the stage where you all are working, because you are in the diaspora, we locally say, look for what you can use to support yourself there. Like you say, what do we have? And working with that, we can then see what we can value add from outside. So for us, it's critical that the young people don't look outward for the support.
Merci beaucoup à tous.
Thank you so much to all of you. I was precisely thinking of concluding the roundtable. You just quoted, in fact, use rather what you have to find what you need rather than what you want. Thank you so much for this most relevant conclusion.